Welcome to our Local Foods Marketing Workshop. I'm Robin Bagley, Communications Director for Powder River Basin Resource Council. We're going to give you some tips about marketing your local foods and products, whether you sell at a farmer's market or direct to consumers. We're going to cover social media, email marketing, websites, and then we're going to give you some tips for setting up your display booth at the market. These are the top social media platforms available. As you can see, Facebook is still king with almost 2.5 billion with a B users. That's where we're going to focus most of our time today. Know your audience. This is where demographics are really important. Who buys from you? If you're adults and you're obviously in Wyoming, you should focus on Facebook because that's where your followers are. That's where your customers are. Don't go where your followers aren't because you're just wasting your time. As you can see, more than half of all Americans under 65 are on Facebook. It also has the highest rural reach with 66% of people using it. So really, this is where you need to spend your time. You may hear things about Instagram, and we are going to talk about that, but it really does trend younger. If you're already on Facebook, you can check your insights to find out more about the people that are actually following you. But remember, you also need to look at your customers that show up at the market. Now we're going to get into the nuts and bolts a little bit. Remember, you want to set up a page. You don't want to do all of this on your personal profile, though you do need to have a personal Facebook profile in order to create a page. Download the Page Manager app. You'll see what it looks like there in the corner. It's available on phones and tablets. It's a free app and it will save your sanity because you open that app, it takes you directly to your page and you don't have to go through your personal account. Once you have created a page, fill in your information. You want a profile pic and a cover photo. You want your contact information there. Use a button so it's easy for people to get a hold of you, but make sure you respond. If they contact you over social media, they do expect you to respond that way. This is a good time to tell your story. Post at least 3 times a week, and remember to include photos in your posts. It's way more engagement. Remember, social media is social, so be engaging, not just selling all the time. Show pictures of your plants, your animals, your farm. It's a good time to tell your story. Save time by scheduling your posts. That will save you so much time and frustration. It's available on both the mobile app and the desktop. And remember, tell your customers you're on social media. Your smartphone is like a photo studio in your pocket. It's very easy to take a photo with your phone and then post it to your page. Take good photos though, and you can do this with your phone. So all the best practices, no thumbs, no black lighting, don't shoot blurry stuff, pay attention to what your background is, don't shoot through glass, and zoom in. You may be hearing a lot about video, and yes, video is huge on social media, but it's also a little bit tricky and it takes a lot of practice to get good. So practice your video. While you're doing that, use your still photos and fake a video. Facebook allows you to create video slideshows with still photos. And there's a couple of good apps out there too, also on your phone. Ripple and Magisto are good apps for creating video with still photos, and they both have free accounts. Now we're going to talk a little bit about Instagram because a lot of people ask about it. It is the fastest growing social media platform out there today, and it's owned by Facebook, so you can actually connect your accounts. Now this is a completely mobile app. There's not much you can do with it from your computer. It is photo based, so you always have to have a photo. And if you have a business that's got a lot of photo potential, beautiful gardens and cute animals, Instagram may be worth it. But you need to know that this is a younger demographic than Facebook. Also, you need to use hashtags. Hashtags are simply the pound key or number sign followed by words with no spaces in the words and no punctuation. It makes your posts searchable on Instagram. Hashtags are useless on Facebook. Also on Instagram, when you're setting up your account, make it a business profile. And you can do this when you're very first getting it set up. It's not as big a deal as it is on Facebook, but it does give you better insights into who's looking at your page, and it also lets you connect your Facebook page to it. Here are some best practices for social media. Remember, know your audience, so check those insights. Think about who you're trying to reach. Don't go where your people aren't. Only pick one or two platforms and get started. Preferably just one if you're really new to this. Use mobile apps for ease. The phone makes it easy. Post regularly, but don't get spammy, which means don't post, 3, 5, 10 times a day. That's just too much. People will unfollow you. Use photos and videos in your posts. Keep your contact info updated. People get frustrated when everything is outdated. Scheduling is your friend. You can schedule posts. And done is better than perfect. Social media is changing. So it's a good thing not to rely just on this one way of communicating with your customers. So Facebook has announced big changes that are coming over the next few years. So think about other ways that you can also contact your customers. Email is important, and websites are still relevant, and they are easy to find. And there are easy services like Wix or Squarespace that make it easy to help you build your site. Believe it or not, email is still a great way to connect with your customers and keep them up to date. But remember to ask them for their email addresses first, so you don't send them unsolicited information. Send only relevant information and updates, not more than weekly. You might not even have to do it that often. And there are some services out there. Several have free plans, helps you manage those email addresses and make your emails look great. Before we go, let's just review a few things. People are consuming huge quantities of information, and they do want more. So don't worry about, adding to the noise too much. Everybody has a phone. They're always looking at it. They're going to see your stuff. But also remember, social media is always changing. And the later you get started with this, the harder it becomes to get going. So start now. Done is better than perfect.
Okay, these are just some ideas of things I've picked up from other vendors that might kind of help. Presentation is a huge, enormous draw. And one of the big things you want to have is lots of color, lots of shapes, lots of levels, that kind of thing. My eggs, I need to keep them in a cooler because that is food safety. But having just a cooler is not great because people can't see it. So if you have a sign on it, people will see that you are keeping their food safe, yet they can see what you have in there. You want to have lots of different levels of food. But I have a bag of ice, and I know that like Christine has big vats of ice where she puts her yogurt in. And that's really important because, again, it tells the customer that you feel safe. So we have all the microgreens here, but they're cool, and typically we'd be back there in the shade. And so people know, okay, these are fresh, they're good, they're not wilted down. But do you see the difference between selling these wonderful greens out of a cooler or have them somewhat displayed? Packaging is another big thing. We try to use recycled bags. We really encourage people to bring their own bag. The other thing too is We try to sell a lot out of clamshells. They're very good to be recycled. If you have cookies, things like that, windows in your bags is a really good thing so they can actually see your product. And then one of the big things too is that if you have like a jar of jelly and you have grape jelly written on it, that probably isn't going to sell it very well. But if you have it, the ingredients, and we know it's just pectin and sugar and grapes, but if you have the ingredients on it, that helps. So like with the granola, it's a huge thing. People will read that. And the label is just not written on the bag. You know, it's a little Avery label. So it looks professional at that point. This is not good because people will look at that and actually they will not realize that that's sunflowers. So it needs to have a label on it. Here's another thing. I don't buy anything that doesn't have a price on it. I just am not a bargainer or that. So I think that's big. And in the front and maybe multiple places would be good. Also, I mean, you have this sack of green stuff. So one of the other big labeling things is tell them what it is. Not everybody knows what Mizuna is. Or they don't know how to fix bok choy or sinposai, which are great early Asian breeds. And where did they come from? Well, they came from our cold frames. And I think that's huge. Then, of course, you definitely want people to know who you are because you are your brand. And we wear hats. You can have aprons made with your logo on it. We're heirloom gardeners, so kind of tells everybody what we are. The other thing that we don't have but we need to have is pictures. Christine has pictures of the cows she gets the milk from. Or we need pictures of the chickens that we get the eggs from. Levels. Levels is huge. If it's up higher, you can actually, people can walk by and see it, which is much better, much better. So sitting with just jars on a table is, I mean, people, they see that there's canned stuff, but they don't know, is it jelly? Is it salsa? Is it pickles? What is it? They have to get closer and they don't really want to get closer because people think that if you do get closer, then they're, oh, come in and buy my thing. So people, and I do this, I walk way away because I don't want to stop and have somebody try to sell me something. So the other thing too is you want to have abundance out here. So nobody is going to buy one bag. Nobody's going to buy that last bag. It's just a weird thing about human nature. So the more you have, the better. So just pile it up there. Make people feel like they're not going to break you with buying the last one. And the same with this. Again, it looks weird. There's only one. This is missing, so you want to always condense and put everything together. Get rid of the other table that's empty and condense them all in the same place. Keep track of what you sell, because then you know what to sell next week. So there's a lot of packaging. This is like the worst packaging in the world. It might be good for coffee. It might be, man, I don't know what it's good for. I used to try to sell crackers in this bag. It's hard to open. Okay, and when I open it, look at this. So then you stick your hand in to try to open it further, and that doesn't work. That's just not a good food safety thing. And then they don't stand up because this doesn't open up. They're horrible. So be careful about, I mean, it looks really cool, but be careful about what you buy because they could be the worst packaging in the world. These are hard too. They're really tiny, and some of these come with two pieces, a lid and a bottom. It takes you forever to get all those pieces together. Bags are great, but they have to look nice. So you have pile up bags there, but then people can't see it. So then you see the difference between this and this. So if people can see how pretty and fresh and fluff everything up, that really makes it look good. Looks like the bag's full. All the bags weigh the same, but the other thing too, this has got to be in the shade. You know, your vegetables always need to be in the shade. My last point is never sit down, because if you're sitting there, then people don't think you're very interested in selling your products. But when you're standing and you are forward, people go, oh wow, they really have a lot of pride in what they're selling. You also want to engage people. So if you're sitting there on your cell phone, even if you're standing, you don't see the people come by, and that's a big issue. If someone is sitting there on a cell phone and I walk by, I never buy it. So the worst thing ever is the person sitting back like this doing this. And people are walking by like crazy and they're going, okay, they're not interested in selling. As opposed to, hey, we got fresh new vegetables today. Man, they came out of the cold frame. We planted them in March. They survived -2-degree weather. Step right up. We only got 6 bags left. It's a whole much better thing. I picked up that from the fish markets in Seattle, the flying fish thing. So, again, you can pick them up. Hey, this is the last one of the sunflowers. Come on, guys. Oh, hi. God, I love that shirt. Where did you get that? You're engaged. Okay, so this is a good example. There's many ways of marketing. The big thing that you need to take away from this is that you are displaying food safety. You're displaying, I love my vegetables, I love my produce, I love you buying them. You're displaying that you take care and you're careful with everything and you have a lot of pride. And you've just got to simply show a great deal of pride in what you have worked very hard to produce.
My name is Adam Bunker. I'm with Papa Joe's Produce, and today I will be speaking about the role of websites for local food producers. I spent about 10 years doing public relations and marketing and website development, and with that in mind, I have titled our presentation today, A Crash Course in Why and How. In all honesty, if you're going to be putting together a website for your business, this probably could have been about a 3-hour presentation. I have significantly condensed this, and if there are parts of this that you are interested in diving into further depth on, then my contact info will be at the end of this, and please feel free to reach out. Starting point number 1, do I need a website? A website can be a very important part of your marketing strategy, depending on who you're trying to reach. So that kind of comes down to the importance of strategy. In a world where everyone has unlimited time and money, then yes, you should all have a website. The problem with that is many of us are limited on time and money. It comes down to defining what your strategy is, because that strategy helps you determine who you want to reach the most for your business. It helps you balance between time and money that you spend on marketing platforms, including websites or social media, and then helps you choose the marketing methods that best fit your targeting strategy. That's really the key thing here. So a website can be very important, but I am not going to sit here and tell you that everyone should have one. You're probably limited in your resources, and ultimately, if you're going to invest in a website, which can be a great thing, you should understand what you're hoping to achieve with that. We'll go ahead and move on to our next slide, sales strategies. This is a huge crash course in some of these different things, and I'm sure they won't be new to most of you. But to boil it really as far down as possible, there are 2 major types of sales strategies. There are direct sales, which are farmers market on-site sales, like if someone comes to your farm or ranch, or if you go meet someone somewhere. Virtual sales, such as if you are doing some e-commerce, and then any other sales that are directly between you and an individual consumer. The commercial retail contracts are some kind of a standing supply contract to like a grocery store or a local food store or restaurants, schools, hospitals, any other business who you're going to be kind of doing a bulk sale to and who you have some kind of a standing relationship with. It may not even be a contractual regular supply, but just something that you know you don't have to put a lot of work into recruiting them. You already have a relationship and you're going to sell in bulk to them. These are 2 very basic types, and as we work through our pros and cons of a website, we're going to circle back and touch on these a little bit. We'll start website pros. It improves your search engine positioning. This is where, in terms of strategy, if you want people to be able to do a search on Google for something like local beet producer or local meat, and you want to come up in those listings, search engine positioning is a very important part of that. A website can help you with that. If you you're really going after some of those commercial contracts that you don't have yet, well, a website really conveys professionalism and viability. It lets people know that you're here to stay. It's almost like the digital version of a brick and mortar store. If you have a lot of information to convey to people, a website can really help you organize that in a way that social media does not. Website obviously provides some base infrastructure for much more advanced features, like if you want to give a lot of detail about a specific product, or if you want to help people order online. Website's a great way to do it. Some additional pros. After the initial setup, a website requires less ongoing time to generate and maintain content. When you look at kind of the initial workload it takes to stand something up, there's a lot more work involved in launching a website than launching a Facebook page. But the flip side of that, after that initial setup, your day-to-day life will involve much less time working on your website than working on your social media platforms. There's a lot of pros, but there are also some cons. Like I said, a website takes a lot more time for the initial setup. Even if you hire someone to do a lot of that work for you, it's going to take time to work with them, to get that content set up, to get your features set up, much more than just trying to stand up a social media page. Secondly, if you've never done website development before, there's a learning curve. For a lot of us producers, we're pretty busy in any given day, and so any extra time spent learning something that doesn't immediately drive what we're trying to do is kind of some extra time that we may not have. So it's important to understand that there's going to be a learning curve on how to work with website builders. Another thing is that this is going to be a recurring theme, but you kind of get what you pay for in a lot of ways when it comes to websites. So the free or less expensive options are typically limited in design or features. That is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's important to understand what some of those limitations are, because if you are wanting to have very, very granular control over what your website does, or have some really advanced functionality you want to get out of it, you need to expect to pay for some more of that feature. A lot of pros, a lot of cons. It kind of comes down to deciding what is most important for you. And so coming back to our different strategies, direct sales. In general, social media is probably a better way to drive your direct sales, because that is more about you and an individual customer, and social media is a really great way to connect with those people and tell your story. But if you're expanding and you're running different marketing programs, the website can help you track how they perform. If you're trying to go after businesses or institutions, then a website is going to lend you that professionalism and credibility that they might be looking for. If you're trying to really grow your market in a passive way, where you just want to come up when people Google something, that's where a website comes to the surface. Where to start with a website? You've set that overall strategy, you've weighed some of the pros and cons of a website, and you've decided you want to proceed. Fantastic. Website's going to do some great things for you. Before you really dig in further or try and decide what you use to build your website, there are a few things that I think if you spend a few minutes to just jot down and decide, it will make it much easier. Number one, do you need just a basic info site? Put some info about yourself out there and then not have to worry about it or edit it, or you're not looking to sell things through it. It's pretty much just I just want to make sure I'm out there on the web. Or are you wanting to build something that's more advanced? Item number two, what are some specific features that you need? If you want a blog, great. If you don't have to have one. But it is important to make that decision, because the tools you choose may change depending on whether you want a blog. Secondly, e-commerce, selling things through your website. That's probably one of the biggest decisions you need to make. The tools that you invest in will make your life much easier if you're willing to pay for it. And also some of your hosting might change depending on whether you're planning to sell things. So just make a list. What are some of the features that you need? Now, a couple things here on budget. What is your estimated maximum budget? Websites can be really expensive. They also don't have to be very expensive. They can be very cheap if you're willing to do something basic and willing to do the work yourself. As you're deciding how best to use your time and money, it's important to get a feel for what your maximum budget might be. As a starting point, just make a reasonable estimate for what you're hoping that website should do to your sales over the next 2 years, even a basic site, just to put your name out there, you want to back out what your net profit would be. And that net profit is basically your max budget to cover the build of your website and 2 years of operation. So what this boils down to is your maximum budget is really your break-even budget. You want to know what your goal is to at least break even on the money you spend. Because if you're not going to break even, you might as well put that money into a different type of marketing that can hopefully make you more money. Now, your upfront budget is a little bit different. It is about estimating how much you can invest upfront in building the site. I'll say rule number 1 is your upfront budget should not exceed your maximum budget. If you think your website will only generate $2,000 in revenue over the next 2 years, you wouldn't want to spend $10,000 on something that you think may only net you $2,000. The numbers don't pan out. Now, as you think about that upfront budget, you also want to keep in mind what features you think you'll need to achieve your sales goal. Let's say your sales goals, that 20% increase, assumes you can sell products online. Your upfront budget needs to account for the features that you need. If your sales goals are based on 100% of these fancy features and you're only willing to pay for 20% of them upfront, you're obviously not going to hit your marks. So that upfront budget helps decide how much work to do yourself and which website option will be best for you. But that's where that trade-off between time and money comes into play. Website components. This is just a very quick overview of what a website entails, because when you start to do your research, you're going to get a lot of different words or products thrown at you. And so I wanted to include this as just a quick overview of what each of these components are. So every website needs the following: a domain name. The domain name is the URL or the web address of your site. For example, ours is papajoesproduce.com. When you go to buy a domain, it has to be purchased through a domain registrar, although oftentimes if you go to buy hosting or sign up for even a free website service, they will give you the option to buy a domain through them, and that is perfectly fine. That saves you a step. In fact, if you can buy a domain at the same time as your hosting, do it. Now, your hosting, this is the one thing that you'll probably hear thrown around a lot. Hosting is the actual server space to house and operate the website itself. Hosting is buying that space for your website. That brings us to website content. And this comes down to 2 parts: content management system, or CMS, which is the part that you interface with to edit your content, and then the visitor facing content, your pages, the text, images, etc., all that. So those are the 3 main components to a website. There's no really succinct answer I can give you on what it's going to cost. The main rule is that it takes either your time or your money to launch a website. So to give you an example, for Papa Joe's Produce, before we did our virtual market, it only cost us about $80 for 1 year. That was for the domain registration and for our hosting, but I spent a lot of my own time building the site itself. But a basic rundown on some of the costs: your domain registration is probably going to be about $20 a year. Your first year is usually included for free with a paid hosting plan. If you're going for a free or inexpensive option, then you probably will have to pay for a custom domain. And if you do, they usually come out to about $20 a year, maybe a little bit less. I'll make a quick note here about privacy protection, because you'll probably get some notices about that. Privacy protection is really expensive, like $20 a month. It is not necessary, but you should know if you don't put protection on there, you're going to get a lot of spam calls and emails to the phone number and the email address you associate with a domain. Your hosting can go anywhere from free to $200 a year. A basic info site can absolutely run on a free plan without any issue at all. But if you're going to be running an e-commerce site, then it's worth looking at either a paid hosting or a more premium tier, Squarespace, something like that, because you're going to want the extra tools and you're going to need site performance that can handle that kind of traffic. Website features, this would be things like maybe tools that help drive your e-commerce. Anywhere from free, you probably don't need any of these if it's a basic site, but if you're looking to run an e-commerce site, then you could be looking at $200 or more a year. I'll say on these costs between hosting and website features, there's a little bit of overlap depending on which tool you go with. It doesn't necessarily mean that an e-commerce solution is the $200 a year in hosting and the $200 a year in website features. Squarespace, I think when I priced out their basic e-commerce, it was maybe around like $260 a year, which would include basically your hosting and your features. And then lastly in here for your costs is doing a build, the actual build of your website. You can definitely build it yourself and avoid paying any costs. If you're even a little bit tech savvy, I'd say give it a shot. You can try it out. Some of even the free website builders have pretty good user interface. If you're gonna pay someone to do it, even for a really basic site, you should expect to pay at least $800. If you're looking to launch an advanced, like an actual e-commerce site where you sell things online, that initial build is probably gonna cost easily $2,000 to $3,000, maybe even more. It's really not unusual to pay $7,000, $8,000 for an e-commerce site if you have a ton of things that you're gonna want to sell and you really just don't want to do the work yourself. That brings us to website options. There's a ton of options out there. So rule number one on this is it's worth doing your research, because if you just Google like best website builder 2020, you can find some great articles that kind of give you a rundown or a comparison on the different options that are out there. Most of these comparisons will lay out the pricing and also give you kind of a snapshot of the different features that each one has. With that being said, for basic sites, Wix or Weebly are often very highly recommended as free or very inexpensive solutions. They do have more advanced and pretty decent packages for your more advanced sites that have e-commerce or additional features, and you can always upgrade later. If you're thinking, I just want to dip my toes in the water, if it works or if some things change, then I can add those features later, by all means. Wix and Weebly are probably two really great ways to do that. They both offer free plans. So if you're going to start out small and do the work yourself, one of those two would probably be a really good option. If you think you're going to be adding a lot more advanced features, if you had some special bells and whistles in mind, or if you wanted to sell things online through e-commerce, that's what we're talking about here. Squarespace has good templates, and they offer several levels of e-commerce plans. So you can kind of start small, and then if it works really well, then you can grow from there. Or if you're really looking for a lot of that, then a more traditional web hosting approach where you buy your hosting will give you maximum flexibility and control over your site. If you have a grand vision in mind, then this is probably the way to go. So these are some starting options. Like I said, what you want to do is do some research and just find what best suits your strategy and your feature needs. In summary, do you need a website? It's not 100%. It can be helpful, it can have a lot of benefits, but if you are limited on time and money, maybe the best way to connect with your customers is something like social media or is doing printed flyers somewhere. Take some time to think about that. Don't necessarily believe the hype that you have to have a website. But if you have a website, it also helps to have put that thought into it so you know what you want to get out of your website. And then you can decide later if the website is doing what you had hoped it would do for you. On that note, I'll go ahead and close out. If you have any questions that you'd like some clarification on or anything that you want to dive into in more detail, please don't hesitate to reach out and contact me directly. My number is 307-751-7422. Or you can reach me at papajoesproduce@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in and have a great day.
We would like to issue a big heartfelt thank you to Rachel Borgalt of Lower Piney Heirloom Vegetables and Adam Bunker of Papa Joe's Produce for all of their help and their knowledge on this presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And if you'd like to find out more about Powder River Basin Resource Council, you can check out our website, powderriverbasin.org. You can also give us a call at 307-672-5809. Thank you.